Hello and welcome to another special MIP Alumni panel discussion, where we will discuss and deliberate the various topics concerning the football industry. In our series of responding to COVID-19, today we're going to focus on player welfare. And as ever, with football, there seems to be as much at stake off the pitch as there is on it. Awareness of a player's welfare is, of course, paramount, and football has made improved strides in recent years. In fact, prioritizing the welfare of athletes across sport is increasingly becoming an essential minimum standard for sporting organizations globally in the development of their programs. However, does everyone in the game believe that duty of care is a responsibility of all of the stakeholders and not just left in the hands of welfare officers employed by respective football clubs or even their unions? Football is, of course, facing a huge challenge in COVID-19. So what additional measures are in place or should be put in place to help players' welfare and mental health? For this discussion, I have the great pleasure of speaking to a panel of former international footballers who are now leaders in the industry across a variety of roles and responsibility, and all graduates or at least taking the UEFA MIP course. Collectively, over this chat, we will aim to highlight what is working successfully, support players, assess where players are most at risk, and identify how we, as the MIP Alumni Association, can potentially play our part in the response to COVID-19. So it's my great pleasure to welcome former Celtic and Aston Villa midfield maestro, Stiliyan Petrov, Bulgaria's all-time most capped player with 105 appearances. Emile Heskey, a proud member of the Premier League's 100-goal club, representing England in FIFA World Cups. And Gareth Farrelly, qualified lawyer with a long Premier League and Republic of Ireland international career behind him. Gareth is also an FA independent football panel member, CAS arbitrator, and Premier League Judicial panel member. Team, it's great to have you all on this panel. It's a real pleasure for me personally. Gareth, that's a long list of achievements there. Player to lawyer doesn't happen very often. It's not a well-worn path. How did that happen?
No, just even when you said it, it felt slightly surreal, to be honest with you. I couldn't have introduced it better myself. No. I've been quite fortunate with my transition. Obviously, people have different interests. Similar to Stiliyan, I had an illness 12 years ago, which kind of focused my mind and led me on the path to transition possibly a little bit quicker than I would have liked. But I managed to find something I like. And as you've said now, it's nice to be a qualified lawyer working in a field that I quite enjoy. It can be quite difficult for players and athletes, as you've said, when they have to finish their sporting career with regards to what they're going to do for the rest of their life. And again, that can be irrespective of your financial position. Everybody faces different challenges. So I think I've been extremely lucky. I acknowledge that. And obviously with regards to the different roles I have now, I'm still learning in that context. So I'm blessed in many ways. So
you mentioned Stiliyan, you mentioned Stan. Hands up, anybody who's heard anything bad about Stan. No, you know that proverbial, the nicest man in the world. No one has anything bad to say about him. Stan, you got any stories of when you've not been the nice guy all the time?
Listen, I've got a couple of stories of being demanding and challenging other people, but I always believe that's the way for me to take the best out of my teammates and people that I've worked with through my career. And again, like Gareth is answering earlier about transition of from playing career to my second career, what it took, how important was. Again, I had to deal with illness, and going through COVID-19, talking about isolation and quarantine. I went through it for a longer period of time, and at the moment, as funnily saying that, I'm kind of happy and I know what to do, because I know how important isolation and how important quarantine is, especially in these days. I had to do it in a completely different way. At the moment, I'm free to go out. I can go in my garden. I can play with my kids. I can be around my kids. When I was in isolation with my illness, I had to be locked down only with my wife in one room in the hospital. I had to avoid people. I couldn't go out. So at the moment, it's a relief for me. Actually, I know how important it is to protect others, how important it is to be responsible. And that time that I had to fight for my life, I had to consider a lot of what was my way forward, how I have to deal with my mental issues, how I have to be mentally strong, how I have to be positive, what is my pathway going forward as a person. Because a lot of people forget, we as athletes, and footballers, we live in a little bubble. And we all been there. When you come out of that bubble, it's completely different. And if somebody tell me, oh, you prepared for it, you start, no, I wasn't prepared for it at all. And if anybody tell you that he was prepared, maybe I'll take 0.05% of the footballers will say, yeah, I'm stable, I'm happy, I had the plan, and that plan worked. Apart from that, everybody will have issues, because we forget that our careers are very short. But our life after the career, it's even longer. And it demands different kind of life, different kind of responsibilities. And I had this time to actually consider what I can do and how I can do it, which for me, it worked. So at the moment, and being in isolation and quarantine, I'm kind of happy because I've been through it and I know how difficult it is, how much responsibility you need to have.
Yeah. So more prepared than most, Dan. We're going to go into that isolation point a little bit later. Hesk, it's good that we can be on this call and we can put the things aside, the fact that you were the reason that Wigan sold me. It's good that we and just have a discussion about other issues.
Actually, you're the reason why I actually got another chance to play in the Premier League. You just upped and left Wigan, and then I kind of just stepped in there.
It's because they told me they were signing Emile Heskey. That's why.
No,
and they couldn't afford both. Both of our strikers, apparently.
No, it's so good. It's so good. But no, it's great to be on this call with all the lads, and it's nice to be reconnecting in the way that we are. You guys helped me actually get onto the course. It's funny because I was asked to go on the first MIP, and talking about transition, I mentally wasn't ready to go back into school, I felt. And then obviously after 3 years speaking to you, speaking to Stan, speaking to Gareth, knowing that you're there to help as well, it made it a lot easier for me, and knowing that I can actually then transition into another part of my career, which is great, because even though I've played, football is a very, very strange industry that you can play for 22 years and not have any qualifications to go any further within that sport. And but this is important when you're guiding people, or when you're telling people about your story, or telling them what they need to do for the next step. It's all about guidance, and you guys guided me onto this course, and it's been a godsend, to be honest.
That's a really important point about what the MIP alumni has really done. So I think, look, turning to the topic and COVID-19 specifically now, in a recent report in the Telegraph, the PFA in England have expressed some of their concerns about the impact of boredom and the isolation specifically, and how that can have a negative impact on footballers' psychological well-being. I think we've seen footballers across England, for example, they've sought help for addiction and depression amid a huge spike in players requesting mental health support during this lockdown. Meanwhile, in the last week, FIFPro announced some professional footballers in Latin America and Africa are relying on food packages during the coronavirus stoppage, whilst elsewhere, others are being pressurized into returning to play, sometimes without testing. What impact could COVID-19 have on the welfare of players and their home environment, Gareth?
Nice, easy question to start with, Jace.
I thought I'd just give you you're the lawyer in the team. I thought I'd give you a nice short pass. Yeah,
I'm going to push for the squad rotation policy again with regards to the questions. Can I phone a friend? No. Listen, it's a fascinating commentary there. And I think one of the challenges we have is, and one of the great things about this kind of webinar is the fact that you're looking about communication for one, but then also education. And I think even with regards to the statement, you're having to break it down into particular segments, because you mentioned Africa, you mentioned different jurisdictions, and you mentioned the challenge that FIFPro have. And it's a very, very difficult challenge with regards to trying to manage all of the situations and scenarios they're presented with. On top of that, you have the situation with regards to the deferral of wages, people being told that they're going to have to take pay cuts, and everything that goes with that. So with regards to the position here, and with the PFA, and obviously with regards to the scrutiny and focus that's on English football, we could possibly look at that one to start with, because although every case is different, fundamentally certain elements of each challenge is the same. And we speak about a duty of care, which I think is key to what we're talking about today. But even a duty of care can be separated out. And I've been speaking quite a lot to people, because you have the first element of duty of care, which is, are people and players returning to an environment that is the safest it can be? And obviously the obligation is on the clubs with regards to that, following guidance that's been handed down by governments. And then we move on to a duty of care with regards to the actual return to play itself, which sits around stage 2 of the return to play, which was announced here over the weekend, which goes back to entering into contact again. And it's fascinating, because each one of those is a topic on its own. So to try and surmise, we have that situation now where in England, with regards to the Premier League Championship, League One is undecided with regards to what's going to happen. League Two has been postponed. There's issues around whether they're going to try and play the playoffs, which again logistically creates an incredible challenge in its own right. But it's not going to be easy. And the mental health element of that for players is, and I think that's, like, even when you listen to Stan talk about the introduction, is that fundamentally, despite what media would have us portrayed as, they're humans like everybody else. So in some cases, they've had a period of being at home for a longer period than they will have had for a number of years. So that's not normal. It's not easy. They are athletes, but they're also people and relationships, and they go through exactly the same things we all do. So I think the player voice becomes incredibly important in trying to articulate to people that sometimes don't want to hear that they're going to face the exact same challenges as everybody else. So it is no surprise that mental health issues are on the rise. FIFPro did their own study to do it, like symptoms of depression that have been identified and recognized. So everybody speaks from where they're sat. That is obviously difficult to compare against people that aren't receiving any of their money, are being pressured by their clubs, and having to rely on food banks just to survive. And I think that's one of the great anomalies about football at the moment, is that despite its riches, one of the FIFPro statistics is around the fact that over 50% of players in the world earn less than €1,000 a month. So I think things like this are really good with regards to trying to publish, communicate, or make people aware that it's not necessarily as portrayed all of the time.
The interesting point about players being human beings, because even during my career and since I've retired, this is the longest I've been at home under these circumstances, and it's a challenge for everybody. The great thing about the MIP is that it has an international feel, that the players, the representatives, and the people on the course are from various countries. So Stan, you of course had a long career in England, where you currently reside, but a little bit on your feelings on the impact of COVID-19 and welfare of players, not just in the UK, but of course in Bulgaria, where you are the record cap holder. Nice statistic, man.
Yeah, well, I think the COVID-19 caused a massive disruption in a global scale in sport in general. I think the lockdown, we don't realize the lockdown has taken our mental and physical happiness away from us. And this is the big issue that going forward with Jason. And I always believe that physically as a human beings, we can always get back to it. We can always go back to a physical condition do you want. But mentally, that's where we struggle mostly. This is where is the biggest issue. And if you look at it physically we don't hide it, because if your leg's sore, you'll be limping. People will be going, oh, what's wrong with you? Can I help you? Can I offer your support? Then you feel wanted. But mentally, that's where everything is hidden. And when you hide, where you don't share, where you don't show weaknesses, because let's get honestly out there, we are all scared to share our weaknesses. Why? Because we are scared to be judged. And that's as an athlete, everybody's been doing it all our life. You've been judged how you perform, how you act, what kind of behavior you've got, and you've got that impression. But when that is taken away from you, then you struggle. You hide it inside. There is such a thing. You can't show your struggles mentally. You don't want to show it. That's why I say physically, we can always recover. That's why with players now in England, we see more voices now coming out and expressing their concerns about their families and about issues, and are they happy to return to play. And what we're connecting it with is not actually, okay, maybe there's an issue there. What we straight away, most of the people, what is they come back with? They get paid fortune. They get paid millions. They get paid this. They've got this. They've got that. He's more into it. And people don't get into it. I read an interview lately, Tredini, who came out and he shared his view, and he was honest, and I loved it. And I'll tell you why I loved it, because he wasn't scared to be judged. He let it out what his concern are, and he wants to be listened like everybody else. You know, people talking about free speech, free movement, well, they just locked us down. They locked down the world. There's not a free of speech or free of movement, and this is something that people are concerned. People now believe in different things. The mental approach, this is a big concern for me, because I've been through it. I know how bad the most powerful organ in the human body is the mind. And if the mind is not right, nothing else will be right. And I know, I've experienced it. I've been in the dark places, going through my illness, playing football, being under pressure. You know, showing a face that you actually don't own. It's fake. That's what most of us are doing. There's nothing wrong to go and say it. I've been there. I know how much pressure I've been, and you have to hide it. You have to go out there and pretend that you're somebody else. But inside, we are vulnerable. We all have problems. We all have secrets. So sometimes, that's why we met so many mental health institutions that try to help. And you mentioned it earlier with the PFA, and there's so many charities out there. There's a rise of concerns about the mental health, and people do have to share. Don't be scared to share. I had to share. I had to cry through my illness, through my hard times. I had to cry. I had to share. I had to seek help. Was I scared to do it? At the start, yes. But then I found out that I was dealing with my problems much easier. I know that people wanted to help. People wanted to be part of my story, and people wanted to push me in the right direction, which I think, covering the COVID-19 with everything that's going on, I think the mental health will be the biggest issues going forward, especially with young people and children as well.
And can you give a little bit more context on what actions did you take? Because I can't imagine how difficult it must have been to come out of that, especially after fighting your illness. What concrete actions did you take to challenge those mental issues that you had? I
had very positive people around me. I shared. I wanted to find the right solution. I understood one thing, and people don't understand that every single situation, every single issue, you have a solution. You can always find a solution. You can always go and research. You can always find it. But my mind, when I was negative, that's where all my problems come. Then I will start doubting myself, what I can do, what I can achieve. Bear in mind, I was fighting for my life. So for me, I realized very quickly that I have to be positive, I have to believe, I have to share, and I have to have a target. And my target is surviving. Same in situation is at the moment, a lot of people go through a mental problem, mental issues, and how they go through it. It's about thinking positive. being patient, fight for it, believe and trust others beside you that can help you and guide you in the right direction. If you don't follow this, it's very difficult to come out of that state of mind, because the mind, it's very tricky. It's very tricky. One day you think you're right, then you go for 2 weeks on a really low down. And if you keep doing that every single day with that positivity and that belief, then you have chance to get out of it. If people say, yes, this one will help with that one, the biggest help will be your own help, your own self-drive, your own self-education of how you want to do it. And that's why I wanted to do it. It's like I always learn from other people's mistakes, how I can avoid them and how I can achieve a better than others, which it makes you better and gives you that intention of getting better and going over hurdles and making sure you're going to achieve more.
Thanks for sharing that, Stan. Stan mentioned Troy Deeney there, and I thought Troy was really brave in articulating a message, especially from the backdrop of the increased challenges from the BAME community, who had disproportionately affected by COVID-19. What were your thoughts about the question raised earlier about COVID-19, but also from the BAME perspective and Troy Deeney's comments?
Well, I think Troy Deeney's comments hit home with a lot of people. A lot of us have children, and a lot of us, they're our main concerns. They're our main problems, in the sense that we've got to protect them. Now, I've spoken to many people and I've asked them the same question. If you were in Troy Deeney's shoes, what would you do? And they all say the same thing. Well, I can't put my child in that danger. I've got to look after my children. I've got to look after my wife. And everyone says the same thing, but again, it goes back to what Stan said before. We all like to pinpoint on one thing. Oh, well, he's getting paid thousands of pounds. Well, he says that he doesn't care about that. His main focus is his children and his child and his wife and his family. I think he articulated it great, where people are not just pointing at him now and wanting to berate him. They're actually understanding why he's saying it. And as well, until the government can come with some stats and figures and understanding of why so many people from the BAME community are falling down or falling foul more regularly to this, they've got to understand that we are not going to feel overly comfortable about going back into a certain environment unless you're very confident in yourself. So, I've got family members who work within all these industries, who are cleaning in there, who are working on the front line. So we have to be careful in that sense. I think Danny Rose come out and said something, and I just felt that the way, I understand what he means, but the way that he articulated didn't come across great. Whereas if you look at it, him and Troy are probably saying the same sort of thing, but one probably said it in a better way. And I think we just got to, when we're actually saying certain things, we just got to be mindful of who we're actually saying it to, and try and get your point across properly. Now, I don't know too much about the stats on the BAME, but it's interesting. Obviously, you know about the way that we're raised and the food that we eat. A lot of it's fried, a lot of it's dripping in oil, and we've just got to possibly take it back to the beginning as a community and look from there onwards. But right now, we need to know why. And government hasn't really given us any answers on that. To be honest, I don't think they've given us many answers on anything, but on that particularly, I don't think they've given us too many answers on that to actually move us forward and make us feel comfortable about going back into the environment.
I would agree, and I think it's also multifaceted. I mean, my borough of Brent, where I was born, where my foundation is, we're seeing really high levels of infection rates, some of the highest in the country, and I think it's to do with some of the issues that you raised, Hes, but I think it's also to do with the fact that many people are still out there working, proximity, getting transport, etc., which is really affecting our communities. I think we need to be more mindful both from a governmental perspective and from individuals about some of our decision making. But it's hard to do that when you have to put food on the table. And I think that's what's made this whole thing extremely difficult for our community. Moving on a little bit, I think we're all probably experts on German football right now. If you're like me, you're even in the time zone here in Miami, you're up waiting for the Bundesliga and return. Do you think it's been successful, and what could other organizations learn from Germany's stand?
My honest opinion, or I should support what people say, Jason?
I want your honest opinion. That's what this is about.
I think they've rushed it way too early. I think the start of football is very low. It's like a training session. I don't really enjoy watching it. I only watched 2 games, and I've said I won't watch it again until the fans are back without an atmosphere. I think I read somewhere today, it's an article regarding risk of injuries. I believe the players are unprepared. Players are holding back. I think it's given advantage to the better teams with the better individuals. So I think it's rushed for some reason. We probably know the reason is the financial, which is understandable. We do miss football, but I think football has to come back when it's ready. And I think that I don't enjoy it. In my honest opinion, I don't enjoy it. I don't watch it. I've watched 2 games and I was really disappointed. This is my only view. Everybody have a view about it. I hope that when English football is back and when Spanish football is back, we can see difference. I don't think we can see difference because as former players, we know how important is a preseason, how important. Now we're talking about players training as a contact training only 2 weeks and going back to full intensity. I mean, the speed of movement, the power, the intensity they're playing, the amount of injuries and risking of injuries, it's incredible. And I don't know how the coaches are adjusting at the moment, because before we're talking about science in the preseason and recoveries is how much you load them. How would they know what to do now? How would they know this? And you can see a lot of people going out there and raising the concern about players not being fit and having major injuries. Mentioned it earlier, I've said about injuries in Germany. They trebled. And it's going to be worse and worse because the fatigue of the players, the games are coming too quick. The weather is even hotter now. I mean, I don't really enjoy it. In my eyes, I don't enjoy it, and I don't really watch it at the moment. I will watch football when it go back to what football means for the fans, for us, the adrenaline, the passion, the intensity, the speed. This is when I'm going to watch it. Do I miss it? Badly, every single day. Do I want it back? Yes, in the right time.
Hesk?
I have watched the games. Have I enjoyed them? Probably not as much as I would like to have enjoyed them. I think one thing is having fans in the stadium do actually help. We're all ex-players. We all know what they mean to you on that pitch. I was speaking recently to a reporter about this situation and about the Bundesliga, and they asked me about the fans, and I said, well, whenever the fans can come back in safely, we need them back. I recently did a game, looking back at a game, Arsenal game, when I was at Leicester. I was watching it with Righty. The game finished 3-3. At 90 minutes, it was 2-1 to Arsenal. Now, with no fans in the stadium, that game's dead. It's finished. No one's going to be pushing you. No one's going to be fighting for you to go and get that winner or that equaliser or nothing. So 2-1 after 90 minutes, 3-3 at the end. You know, we need the fans in the stadium, but obviously it's got to be a safe environment for the fans to go back into the stadium. Stan picked up on the injuries. The injuries is going to be a massive one. You know, when you go back to pre-season, there's going to be a few injuries straight away anyway. You can't mimic as well. You can't mimic that intensity that you need on a football pitch, in front of fans and everything. You can't mimic that on the training pitch, really. You can do it to a point, but you need that to get on that pitch, and that intensity, someone pushing you as hard as you can, the changing of directions. You see, we spoke to Fabian, a couple of players, and they're really sore after one training session. But these lads are fit. These lads have been running hard for the last 6 weeks. These lads are doing 16, 17, 18 minutes in 5K runs. But that doesn't mimic the same thing that you're going to have to do on a football pitch, and changing direction, someone pushing you off the ball, and you've got to try and fight them. And this is going to be tough to mimic until you actually get them playing again. But playing in front of playing at an empty stadium, I actually commentated. I did punditry. It was Croatia versus England, empty stadium, and that was just weird. It was just a strange atmosphere. There was nothing to the game. It was slow when it wanted to be, and then it was a little bit quicker here, and it was slow. There was no real intensity. There was no real hunger, no real fight. The strange thing for me is with the Bundesliga, I've seen 5-0s, 5-2s, 5 this, 4 that. I'm like, huh? So many goals. But I'm guessing it's just no one's really been prepared well enough, and you can't get prepared.
Yes?
I think it becomes really interesting because football is a game of opinion, and that opinion is far-reaching and ranging, and it's always brilliant to hear everybody's kind of take on this. I think the point at the moment is, even in giving an opinion, and we talk about a media that has been redundant for the last 3 months, and their desperation to be able to write about live football and everything that goes with it. So we'll all have our individual opinions on the game, the intensity. And again, with regards to expertise, you're not going to get better opinion than listening to Emile yourself and Stan with regards to the actual game itself. And I think that comes back to knowing when you were at your optimum, which was obviously a process. And that process could have been 6 to 7 weeks. In some cases, there may have been preconditioning before that. And that's where I think the challenge is now, because what you're basically saying to those people within that 6 to 7 week period, then you went into the season where people would have still been saying to you, don't worry, after 3 to 4 games, you're going to feel properly match fit and at your optimum level. And as you say, to shortcut that, and we come back to the start point about the duty of care, and the second limb of that is that the sports scientists and everybody are back to the term that's been coined throughout all of this is an unprecedented situation. And that comes back again to, you look at the German protocol that was put in place, was incredibly detailed with regards to all of their phases of return to play. And they've done that return quicker than anybody else. And the reality to that return is that the data we're going to be dealing with is live data. So Stan is exactly right. Within the first week of return football, you had 14 injuries. And that was across Bundesliga 1, Bundesliga 2. Then you went into the second game on Saturday, and then this week becomes key because the Bundesliga teams are going to play midweek, and then Saturday again. So we're going to get a feel from the data as to whether people are getting better or whether there's going to be increased injuries again on the back of that. The concern, and it's about raising an awareness in the conversation, is that it's unknown in some ways, but if you look at sports, I spoke on Friday about the NFL, where in 2011 you had a lockout for 4 months, which was obviously a dispute between the league and the players. And that protest was resolved and the players returned to training. And within a month, there was 12 Achilles tendon injuries, a mixture of injuries and ruptures within 1 month. Because again, the points that we're raising are there has to be a consideration given to the players and not loading them too quickly. And then the different movements that Emile said, which you can replicate in your back garden. You can put your videos on Instagram if you're doing your sit-ups, but like actually being in that competitive environment and taking part in games, and there's levels within levels. So even training together is completely different to small-sided games, which is completely different to friendly games, which is completely different to the intensity of a Premier League game, which is what the Premier League is built on. So I think the Premier League and the Championship are going to face their own challenges in that. ally that to the conditioning of a top athlete who's used to playing 2 games a week and has had a period of inactivity now unrivaled for a number of years. So you don't know physiologically the effect that that's going to have on the players. So I don't think it's easy to say when was right. I think we have it here in the UK at the moment where people are talking about a definitive return date of the 12th of June. I am comfortable with a return to play, and I think people recognise the reasons for that. It's economics. And again, the powers that be have to stand up and say, fundamentally, the key reason for returning at this time is to do with economics and the potential catastrophic situation so many clubs face. And again, this is unprecedented, Jace, because that situation is, there's a waterfall effect to that. At every level, there's pressure. And we don't know how that's going to play out. But at the end of the day, without the players, we don't want a situation where the Europa League final and Champions League final are contested by both under-9s from the academy because they're the only fit players left in the club. So it's going to be interesting to see how it all develops.
But we've also, it's interesting you mentioned economics there, Gaz, and I think we've heard players saying they feel like lab rats. What impact does being pressured to play, would you feel pressure to play, Hesk, in this scenario, even though you may have your concerns? Gareth mentions the economics to this, the reality that for the game to get back means that the economic benefits will then return to the game, some of the economic challenges across the leagues. So as a player, would you feel pressured in coming back?
Yeah, we've seen it. We've seen it firsthand that the players are feeling pressured to actually get back on. Some are happy to go back out there and train and happy to be in and amongst the lads and looking forward to going back. But others feel that they are being pressured, and they probably are, because one thing, they've felt the pressure ever since this the COVID-19 hit the whole globe. They were the first ones that everyone was talking about. Instead of coming out and saying what we can do as a country to help our health and help this, they were talking about players' wages. So they felt the pressure all along here now, and now they're talking about getting them back as for entertainment. They need entertainment, so it's got to be someone who's got to entertain them, and this is what it is. So you probably would feel pressured, but again, we feel. Going back to when I was playing, I always felt pressured. So I don't think it would be a problem for me to go out there and go and play, because I would have that mindset. Oh, that's my duty. But we've changed a little bit going along the years, and now they have more of an opinion than we did. We were allowed to voice back then. We wasn't allowed to say anything about not wanting to be on the pitch because of this or because of that. The amount of times that I would just strap up my ankle, strap up my knee or whatever it is, and just go out there, and that's all pressure. I can just about go for a run now. I'm slower than Stan now, but you know. Nice.
No, but guys, what I want to say here, and it's interesting to see. We don't see it just with sport. We see it with every industry, and it's a shame to see that at the moment we talk about pandemic, and what we see now is again wealth before health. Mm-hmm. This is the something that we see. We forget that at the moment with the pandemic, with COVID-19, we're talking about the health, and we still manage to put the wealth before the health, which we don't realize there's a big issue here. And it's understandable. It's very understandable why football is back, why everybody's pushing to get back. It's really understandable. And I'll tell you what, as much as we say that some players are right, some players are wrong, there's so many unanswered questions out there. There's so many if and buts, and it's so many questions that can we restart? And if we restart, how is gonna finish, and what we need to go through, how good it's gonna be. There's so many questions out there. But don't forget, guys, maybe if we're in their shoes, don't forget that as a players, we used to have purpose, and our purpose was to go out there to train, the adrenaline, the dressing room environment, the build up, the fans, the entertainment. This is something that players, athletes, we do miss that. Mm-hmm. And you can't blame them. And now, as much as I don't enjoy the Bundesliga, I know that the players feel great because they can run, they can do what they love to do. But that's the only thing we could do. That's what we wanted to do. We wanted to be in this industry, and as much as we try to pick what is right or wrong, this had to pick. And discussing is great, and a lot of people out there are making sure that they try to make the right advices and to make the right changes. And I hope at the end, looking into the future, there will be the ones to say, well, we mentioned it and we did talk about it, and it will be great to see what the future will show for us.
Mm-hmm. There's an interesting point that's being raised there around health. I think as ex-players, we can all attest to this. How many times did you go into a game 100% fit? People don't realize that a majority of times you go into the game 70% fit, 80% fit. You've got an issue. You're having to strap this injury up. You're having to deal with that. I think that plays into what these players are now going to have to encounter going into a game not 100% fit. And Gareth, people have now put forward the five substitutions. Do you think that's going to make a big difference? Is that going to help us to counter some of these fitness issues?
Well, no, but it's something they've looked to do again to address the potential issues of players going from naught to full impact, full games without having the possibility of replacing 2 more players per game. And I think within the first weekend, there was a number of teams in Germany took that up. I think the nice part about this is trying to, one, demonstrate the human side of the fact that we were players and ex-players. And I think going back to the opinion point again, it becomes interesting because what Troy Deeney did very well, and this is again the challenge we face as a stakeholder, a player group, or different elements around that, is that it wasn't just about him. And again, there's the element of detail within all of these things, because his primary concern was his son, who has a respiratory issues. So immediately, everybody will have an understanding and an empathy who has children, for the basis that nobody's going to look to do anything that would potentially compromise the health of their children. And Emile touched on that. And then obviously you have immediate family who may have underlying health issues and different problems around that. So I think that it's not easy for the stakeholders in any way. Stan talks about playing in empty stadiums, but for me, that wouldn't have been too much of a deterrent. I may have got less stick from the fans. So as I say, there's swings and roundabouts to each situation, but it's great to have the conversation. But I think the underlying point for us is that the player voice, for me, we talk about a utopian outcome from COVID-19, what we might learn and what we would hope to see. And I think Stan speaks brilliantly about health, because fundamentally, having had the experience he has, your health is your wealth. Without that, everything else becomes irrelevant anyway. But the secondary point to that for us is trying to not change the message in some militant style, but to have that player voice be heard and be stronger. And I think we talk about the players per se, but what coronavirus did in some way was not derail, but put a stop to other key issues that were taking place at that time around racism. And there was a momentum built up because the players, and particular high-profile players, had taken such a strong position. And by doing so, they changed the narrative. If you look at what Raheem Sterling did, if you look at some of the players, and I think COVID-19 for me still becomes that opportunity that whilst people will continue to write what they want, and we talk about the strength of Troy Deeney in what he spoke about, we talk about Danny Rose and how it was said in a different way, but fundamentally the message was the same. There was equally Premier League sources who were saying, oh, these guys earning 60 grand a week should be prepared to take some level of risk. And in trying to simplify it, and I spoke to Stan about this, we were talking about the analogy from Shrek, being that when Shrek went to get his deeds for his swamp, and there was a fight over who was going to earn the right to go and save the princess, and he destroyed all around him, and then the powers that be stood up and said, welcome our champion, who's prepared to go and risk his life to save the princess. And as the Lord, he said, that's a risk I'm prepared to take. And I don't think that's acceptable on its own. I think that the player voice has to be involved in every stage of this return to play and be a strong voice within that. And I believe the PFA, I believe FIFPro, and I believe the player unions, and obviously ex-players, we have a responsibility to be able to highlight to people that it's not just as straightforward as saying, oh, well, they earn a lot of money, so you should be prepared to go out and run around. I don't think that's the case at all.
You know, as part of that, Gareth, surely athlete mental well-being is going to be as important as their physical health. Hesk, have you witnessed a cultural shift in today's game in comparison to when we were playing regarding mental health? Also with the opportunities people have to talk, or the different stakeholders who have provided some resource for the players to reach out to?
In what sense do you mean? Because back when we were playing, what was there? You know, there wasn't really much outlet for us to actually say much, and to be honest with you, I don't think any of us felt very comfortable coming out and saying anything. Now, as well, I think now it's more suited to coming out and as long as you've got the facts to back it up, you've got different platforms. You've got social media. Raheem, I think Gareth mentioned it. Raheem as well hit a nerve as well with certain things that he actually said, and but he didn't just say it, he backed it up, and he had the platform to back it up. He just left it there for people to make up their own minds, and it was brilliant how he did it. Now, we never really had that. There was only one platform back then, and we didn't really have the control of that platform there. We had no control of that. So for us, it was difficult back then.
Stan, mental well-being is always an interesting point for me, because as much as we talk about resources, as much as we talk about dealing with players' mental health, and I know that we had less resources when we play, it always becomes a difficult scenario when winning and losing becomes the focus of what you're doing. And once you're in a squad, once you're in a team, once the focus is winning, it's kind of, in some ways for me, flies in the face of trying to take care of everybody mentally, because it's such a pressurized situation. And regardless of anything, the winning and losing will be what a majority of people value.
You know, I talking about from experience of I've captained my national team, I've captained Celtic, I've captained Aston Villa, I've captained some great sides, and I'll tell you what, most issues for me wasn't players' ability or players' drive. It was the players' issues outside football. And as a captain, I had to understand and I had to deal with so many issues outside football. We're talking about take the football ability, take the passing ability, take the physical ability. We're talking about issues that are outside football, financial issues, family issues, wife issues, lover issues, gambling issues. When we as a player come with something that is not right in our head, we can hardly do our job in the right way. I've seen players, outstanding players, incredible in training. When it comes to the games, they're froze. They just can't play. They just can't. And there's no ability. It's about a mental problem, and you have to find that. And when you're captain of a team, when you speak with 25 guys, when you have 25 guys with different characters, testosterone, everybody want to have an ego. How are you going to deal with that? How are you going to make them play together? How are you going to find that issue, that important things that they're going to play for together? This was, for me, was the most challenging thing. It's not how good the player is, how good is his mentally is. This is the important bit for me. And for me, as a captain, I had to understand every single. Emile played with me. He'll tell you, I would pay attention to every single player. I will be first in training to have a coffee. I'll be up there to see the coffee, because you see little things. You see people, they struggle. They'll go and sit alone. They won't share. They don't want to be disturbed because they've got something in their mind. You're going to look at them in training. They look at them, their behavior after training, before the game, after the game. This is little things that make a massive difference in the long term. So for me, mental approach, mental understanding was more important than anything else, because sometimes with a player with less ability, but with the right mind and right attitude, it can put a lot of value into your team and performance of the team.
Jace, I think, sorry not to step in, but I think one of the unique things in listening to Stan talk is an emotional intelligence. And we talk about captains or managers or staff having those things. I think it's extremely rare in football now, because irrespective of we talk about the altruism and the challenges that people face, but fundamentally you're still faced with the point of ego, individuality, and all of the points that help you tick to be that product or what people see on a pitch on a Saturday. And I think in some ways what coronavirus has done, and we can talk not using economics, player welfare, mental health, but what it has done is accelerate a lot of issues that were possibly coming to the surface anyway. Like, I can talk now, as you started with me being a lawyer, like that I'm quite fortunate that my life is better now. I don't miss football because my personality was different, and I struggled with that all the way through my football career. My personality was, I was a perfectionist. If 9 out of 10 people after a game came to me and said, you were really good today, and one said I was crap, that's the person I went home with. And for me, there had to be a number of things, like Stan has identified, there had to be a number of things right for me to be able to perform at my best. When I was at my best, I had no worry. But fundamentally, we're talking about distraction, we're talking about decision-making, but we're also talking about the quality of the people you have around you. And that's one of the interesting things that I think we all have a unique skill set that you possibly look at more closely now is the people within the club, and do they have the necessary values, not just in a coaching and management capacity, but that emotional intelligence to be able to bond, build trust, have that individual player be comfortable with them to help them get back from this that little bit quicker. And I think that we get distracted a lot by everything about the game, the product, the crowd, the money, and it's Hollywood now, and it's entertainment. We use words like that, but fundamentally, I think for us it's not about being old-fashioned in our thinking, but it's a recognition of the things that make the best people the best, and not moving too far away from that. And I think emotional intelligence is key to that.
Gareth, that's a really interesting point for me, because you talk about emotional intelligence. My determination to make the best of my ability came from a need and a want to win, which meant, and you spoke about being a perfectionist, which meant that I never enjoyed any of the brief successes that I had. But also my motivation didn't come from a nice place. It came from a place of I don't want to say a dark place, but a place of just wanting to win and not having anything else in the way of that. And I think it's interesting to see if I would have had more focus on my mental health, would that have helped me, or whether it was always going to be that my motivation and my drive came from this need and this want and this almost dark place of wanting to show that I was good enough. And as soon as you won, the focus was the next one. And it just didn't come from anywhere positive for me. But again, that's what drove me to make the best of my ability. Just another further question for you, Gareth, more so on the financial and legal implications concerning players during this pandemic, because it's always come back to the dollars, hasn't it? It's always come back to the economics. What could be the implications coming back out of COVID?
No, well, there's a number of which, and I think what some people are looking at the moment is that COVID-19, be it a black swan, or it creates an opportunity for people to try and recalibrate the perceived balance of power in the game. So I think a lot of the issues that have been spoken about, and I think the stakeholders have done their best, is obviously not getting into the boring legalities, but the point being that those whose contracts are due to finish on the 30th of June, what happens to those players? And again, that can differ dependent on the national law jurisdictions, but the solution that was put in place for that is to extend the contracts until such time that the contracts end. That's possibly point one. Point two is difficult with regards to players in, say, if we use Holland as an example, where the league has been cancelled, where Ziyech from Ajax has signed a pre-contract agreement with Chelsea, and with regards to when that contract would start. And that's at the elite level again. So there's still questions around those things, but in its basic form, what they're looking for is that the contracts would be extended so the players will continue to receive their salaries as per their contract until such time that we have a definitive date for games to start and the season to finish. And I think that it's unfair in some ways not to talk purely about economics, but one of the reasons they want that to happen is for the integrity of the game, which is to try and make it a little bit simpler with regards to promotion, relegation, and the potential legal challenges that could come with that, because some of the leagues so far have been determined by points per game. We have France, where the league was stopped and PSG were declared as champions, And now one of our course partners, if you like, Bruno Cheru, is in a situation where the club Olympique Lyon, the owner of the club now, is looking at bringing a legal challenge against the fact that the league has been cancelled or stopped with winners declared, where all of the other European leagues have looked to take a different position. But obviously that was government mandated. So that's elite level. Then you go down to the Championship, League One, League Two in this country, and across some of the more European leagues that don't have the same level of revenue or exposure. And it's extremely challenging for players. And I think what everybody has said is I think the mental health issues have greater potential to be more difficult for those players, because you look at Scotland as an example the other day, Dunfermline released 17 players. So 17 players who, when their contract finishes, are going to be, in theory, unemployed. They don't know when the new season will start, so clubs are unlikely to be making signings, and they're going to find themselves in an extremely challenging situation. I think some people have said over 1,500 players in the UK will be out of contract on the 30th of June. So when I talk about the recalibration, it's going to be incredibly challenging for players, because they will go from, on the 30th, receiving, say, the last payment. There's the potential for a month's severance if they haven't got a new club, but then finding themselves unemployed with the possibility of accepting a lesser offer than what their playing value may be, just to be guaranteed employment. So I think we talk about the cycle of a pandemic, or what we've moved through. And again, everybody's identified, first point was the politicization of footballers, and look at these guys. Every situation that was going wrong in the world was diverted back towards footballers earning huge amounts of money to try and distract the inability and failures of others. I think the players dealt with that incredibly well here. But now we're in the return to play phase. Should players come back? Should not? What's the risk? We don't know the answers. Exactly what Emile said. We have got no scientific evidence to be able to demonstrate what the implications and health elements of returning to play may be for players, because we've never been in this situation before. But we're going to then move on to another potential problem with regards to, just in this country, that amount of players being out of contract. So it's by no means straightforward.
Yeah, absolutely. It's multi-dimensional. And Hesk, to Gareth's point, player morale, having to potentially go into a situation where you're not sure about your contract situation, you're not sure about the chances to move clubs. We've seen competitions cancelled. Here at CONCACAF, we've had to postpone some of our competitions, but some of our leagues have continued. What could this do to the morale of players being in this grey area?
Oh, it is tough, very tough. In a sense, now if you know that your contract's up and they're going to extend it month to month or whatever, or week to week or whatever it's going to be, you don't know whether you're going to get another contract after that. Plus, you don't know what team you're going to be. You could have been talking to teams before that, and then now you've just had to put that on the back burner. There's going to be so much going through your mind. Injuries is one, because if you get a bad injury, who's going to look after you while you're actually trying to find a club? No club's going to take you. Then where'd you go? So there's going to be so much going through the player's mind, and this is where Gareth will tell you as well. This is where PFA and people like that are going to be hugely important on the mindset and the emotional side of the players, because we don't know what the players are going to be going through. So imagine you've got the end of this. You're coming towards the end of your contract. You're stuck at home anyway. You don't know what's going on with this person's family life. Plus, he's then been said that he's got to go back and he's got to play, and he breaks his leg. Then what? You know, we've got all these things that is going to be going through these players' minds, and we've got the PFA have got to be out there to help. The FIFA Pro have got to be out there to help them, and you know, it's going to be it's unprecedented times that we're living in.
Stan?
Jason, well. Let's play a little scenario here. We won't discuss it. We'll play a scenario. I'm an agent. You're the player. Your standard of living. You live from paycheck to paycheck. Yeah. You have to do. You have to. We've been dealing with a transfer issue for a couple months. End of the season is approaching. Now, Are we going to restart? Not going to restart? If we don't restart, how the clubs will deal with the transfer market? I'm your agent, Jason. You have to go back and play, because if you don't play, you don't get the transfer. But what's your view about it? What are you going to decide? Now, the Premier League, the Championship, they're asking you who wants to play. Oh, what are you going to choose, Jason? Exactly. Exactly. And you don't have a choice. This is, and you can imagine how many players are in this situation. And can you blame them? No, because can you blame the others? No, because both have a completely different views about it, the completely different issues, and everybody's striving to what they're best for them. There's no united that nobody make a decision based on everybody getting piece of the pie, doing the right thing. Everybody maybe the word will sound not right, but we become very selfish in this situation, and this is the way it is. This is the way it is. And I've just given you a scenario, and are you asking a lot of players won't play? Well, half of the players are running out of the contracts, and they have to move to clubs, and agents put the situation the way I've put it to you. You have only one answer.
Gareth?
Unfortunately.
No, it's fascinating. It's fascinating. But the point within that is, I come back to the points I've tried to make, which is around the communication and education side, and people having someone trusted that they can speak to. And I think that's important. And we've got a solidarity from the MIP course, and it's quite unique because we've gone through football careers, which we're no longer defined by. And obviously, we have to say how well you've done and the role you've gone on to take now, Jace, which wasn't mentioned earlier. But I mean, that's why I believe that it's important to have that ex-player voice, because it's somebody that can relate. And I think that the second point I'd made is that this pandemic has accelerated issues that were already there and created a unique situation for that. Because like Stan says, you want an agent that's going to be honest with you and not just be thinking that, well, if I don't get paid at the end of August, then that's going to have a knock-on and detrimental effect on our business model or our forecasted fees we were going to generate for this window. And this is where football's unique challenge now is to look beyond money, revenue, what's happened to the game over the last few years, and to start to return to an element of care, and to looking to protect the participants and protect the game. And I think I can't say I would have huge optimism for that happening, but I think it's one of the things that kind of galvanizes us as a group to start to have an alternate message for people that we need to protect the game and we need to protect the players, because without them, you're not going to get the game. Yeah. And all of the points we've discussed so far become even more relevant.
Stan, Gareth mentioned the group, and I think that is a question that we should come to, is what role can this MIP network play in the ongoing discussions and the rehabilitation of football back after this COVID-19?
I think we can give a platform for players to trust somebody, to believe that is there somebody to listen to them, to make sure that we gonna give a platform for them to have a voice, to have an opinion, and to share their view about it. Because like Gareth mentioned, is without the players, not just with the current players, with the former players, without that society, it's very difficult to understand what is right and what is wrong in sport. And we have to listen to each other. If we don't, we can never succeed. And at the moment, the COVID-19 is challenging not just football, every single sport, every single industry out there. But together, we can be able to deal with it and adjust and adapt and move forward with a better football industry. I believe so. But with the program and the society we've got, I think we can give the players the platform to believe that it's going to be a better outcome after all of this.
Hesk, I'll pose the same question to you and also comment that what makes our network interesting is that we can have these discussions as former players, but also as leaders who are going into administration and going into roles in football, which means that our decision-making can somewhat affect the environment in which the players will be part of. Of course, we have a unique perspective as those that have played the game, but what's interesting as well is the roles that all of us currently hold and will hopefully go on to hold. Certainly from our MIP1, there's been such an uptake of people who've gone into really interesting roles. And what's great is that we can have this collaboration, have that discussion where we can come to some form of diverse thinking or thought leadership about the issues that affect the game. So the question to you, Heskey, about what you think the MIP network can do on these to not only give back to the game, but also in response to COVID-19.
I think, like you're saying, we've got a lot to give back to the game. I think for ourselves, having played in the environment for that long, it's just challenging your mind to think in a different way. And this is why I got on the MIP course, just to challenge myself to think differently and to put myself in different positions to see what football's like from their point of view, and giving my point of view from being from the pitch side of it, and see if we can actually come together. And when you actually look back, when you actually look into it deeply, we've got so much to give back. You look at what Ajax are doing as a club, and generally within that club, everywhere within that structure is an ex-player. And it's because they have an understanding of a team. They have an understanding of what the footballer wants, and what the football club wants. So they bridge the gap in that sense. And I think more clubs are going down that route. One of the biggest things that I took out of, and I've not even finished my MIP course yet, was Arsene Wenger's comments on it's about time we took football back. And it was just a powerful thing that he actually said. And look, we can all think these sort of things, but hearing it from him, who's actually gone and done that and knows the power of having us within the structure, within the structure of football itself, is huge. We've got so much to give back, and like I said, we played within team sports, so having ourselves blended in and finding our niche and making it work and adding value to football itself is normal for us. We've been doing it from the age of 9. You know, some people played even younger than that. So again, this is just giving me the opportunity to actually articulate myself a bit more and understand where I could possibly fit within this society.
Gareth?
No, I think, Emile, what you said, and you talk about articulating your message in a positive way. I think that is excellent. The counterpart to that for me is I'm a lawyer. I'm a commercial litigator. Much of my practice at the moment deals with the negative side of the game. 40% of players face bankruptcy within 5 years of retiring. 30% are divorced within 12 months. 35% now have mental health issues. And I think that all of these things have to be addressed and support offered at the right time. And with regards to the education, there's also a point of significance, which is not education for education's sake. I think you have your unique experience of having been a player, and then by educating yourself, by doing a course like an MIP or a master's program, you're upskilling yourself to a level and a degree that not a lot of people would take the time to do. And you're basically applying the skills you had as a footballer: resilience, determination, willing to learn. And I think that's what we would probably take from the course, but with a view to being not isolating yourself that it's solely player centric, but we cannot help the fact that we will always have a unique kinship as ex-players, and that will always be one of our positions. But yet, Emile speaks about adding value, but I come back to the point of having trust, credibility, and having relationships, and having the ability then to relate to somebody because they may be going through something you've gone through. So it's not unique, but we talk about decision making. The game hasn't changed, has it? But fundamentally, the better people and the more people of that type around you, the more likelihood is that you will make the correct decision and then be able to do the positive things that we all want to see. Play to the best of your ability, fulfill your potential, and not be potentially sidetracked by the challenges that we've all faced and had to deal with.
Thanks, Gareth. I think we could have continued discussing this all day. It feels like we're just getting into it, but unfortunately, that's all that we have time for today. I want to really thank you, Gareth. Thank you, Hesk. Thank you, Stan, for your time. The panel and discussion has been first class. Well, thank you for your contribution and taking the time to join in with us. And I hope that we're leaving everyone watching with lots to think about, and also some solutions and some diverse thinking to consider as well. So keep your eyes peeled on our MIP social channels as we continue to gather more decision makers to join this conversation. We feel that we are that step closer to an increased return to football, but there still remains lots of work to be done as we continue to tackle COVID-19. Feel free to drop a comment below. Let's continue to talk. Like I've said previously, we are in this together. Stay at home, and most importantly, stay safe.